Good afternoon. Thanks to all who are joining us today for the first time, and welcome back to those who have joined us previously. Welcome to the May session of the Erie County Workforce Collaborative Training Series. The Erie County Department of Mental Health is happy to be able to offer these trainings to the providers in our community to support workforce retention and provide an opportunity for individuals from our provider community to share their expertise. Today, we are very excited to have Melinda DuBois, MSW and Executive Director of Mental Health Advocates, joining us to speak on easing stress, the mind-body connection. We are also excited to announce that we do have a special session that we'll be hosting in June. This will be with Krista Fascio-Beback, JD MSW, and the Director of Quality Improvement and Training at CCNY. This will actually be on CQI 101, an overview of the fundamentals of implementing quality improvement. Because this is a special session, we will be hosting this on Thursday, June 29th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. So a different day and time than our typically scheduled Lunch and Learn series. We do have the registration link on our website, and Amy will also be posting it in the chat at the end of this session. Stay tuned though for more information on our regularly scheduled training for June, which Amy and I are currently finalizing some details on. So more info to come on that as well. A few reminders for the training today. At the end of this session, we will be asking everyone to complete a very brief evaluation. We hope that you take just a few moments to fill that out so we can continue to grow and improve our training series. All of the presentations and recordings for our past offerings are posted on our website, so we'd encourage everyone to check those out as well. The registration information for our June session, Amy will be posting into the chat at the end of our session here today. We are always looking for volunteers to share their expertise with our community of providers. So if you're interested in doing a 1-hour presentation, or if you're interested in a particular topic, please indicate that on your evaluation, or feel free to contact Amy. Her email address is amy.rockwood@erie.gov. The training today is being recorded and everyone is muted. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat box. I'll be monitoring the chat during the presentation, and Melinda will be answering questions as we go. So don't hesitate if you have a question to shoot that into the chat. And again, thank you all for joining us today. And I'd like to introduce Melinda DuBois to talk with us about the mind-body connection and self-care. Thanks, Melinda. It's all yours.
Thanks, Kathleen. Thanks, Amy. And I'm so grateful that all of you have joined us today. Again, my name is Melinda DuBois. I'm the Executive Director of MHA. I'm also a social worker. I'm a yoga instructor. I'm a daily meditator. I am a wife. I'm a mother. I'm a dog owner. I live in East Aurora. And I'm also somebody who struggles with anxiety. So I feel like I'm an expert in this area of easing stress. So today we're going to talk a bit about stress. We're going to talk about the stress cycle. We're going to do a little practice, a little meditation practice, and then we're going to learn some self-care strategies. But I have an important task for all of us for the next 45 minutes to an hour. And that is to close down your email, to put away your phones, to really focus for this next time on the presentation and specifically on yourself, because we are, most of us, in the human services field, and we have a tendency to focus on our clients or our patients, the people we serve. And this hour is dedicated to taking care of yourself. So as I go through these slides, it's really important to just take that space to reflect on your own experiences. So let's just take a deep breath and we'll jump right in. So we're going to start with what's happening in the world right now. You all know that we are in what's considered a mental health crisis that is affecting all of us. I've seen some studies that have said that about 1 in 4 people struggle with a mental health diagnosis right now. You know, before COVID, maybe 5 years ago, we said 1 in 5. And you know, here at MHA, we've been talking a lot more about a different statistic, and that is 5 in 5. Because realistically, if we're not experiencing mental health concerns ourselves, we have a child who is experiencing that, a parent, a neighbor, a coworker. So mental health issues really affect every single one of us. And we know that the rates have really increased. So rates of depression and anxiety have increased. One of the most alarming statistics that I've heard just recently is that about 1 in 3 adolescent girls have persistent feelings of hopelessness and despair. And that is really, really startling for all of us to understand. You guys know this, you're seeing this all the time. And so what's happening? You know, why are these things happening to our society right now? Why is this a mental health crisis? We know there's a lot of reasons, and I'm just going to name a few, and you know what's happening in your communities. But COVID had a major impact on our mental well-being, racial concerns, political upheaval, divisiveness in our society, and social media. That's a major factor. And certainly in our community right here, we have experienced community trauma. So we've all experienced this collective trauma. Certainly it started with 5/14 just a year ago. We've lost significant people in our lives through fire. We had the blizzard. We watched a Buffalo Bills player have cardiac arrest on the field. I mean, we've all experienced an enormous amount of trauma. So it's no wonder that we're feeling this stress. And it affects our workplaces. So we used to say that, you know, you could leave your troubles at home and go to work and really focus on your work. But we know we can't do that. We have to bring our authentic human beings to work with us every day. And so when we think about mental health and stress reduction and mental well-being, we know that we also have to take care of ourselves in the workplace. MHA National, which is Mental Health America, does a study every year called Mind the Workplace. And last year, this study reported some significant findings. One of those statistics is about 4 in 5 employees report that workplace stress affects their relationships with their friends, family, and coworkers. No surprise there. What this study also found is that more and more individuals are looking at their workplaces as places that they can find support when it comes to their mental well-being. So we're seeing a shift in workplace culture so that more and more workplaces, agencies, and organizations have to focus on the mental health of their workforce. So let's talk about what stress is. So we all know what it feels like, right? But what is a good definition of stress? I love this definition from Emily and Amelia Nagoski. They wrote this book called Burnout, which is a phenomenal book. I highly recommend it. So this definition of stress is the neurological and physiological shift that happens in our bodies when we experience a threat or a trauma. So this is that whole mind-body connection. It doesn't just happen in our brain and in our thoughts, but we physically feel stress in our bodies. So it's the neurological and physiological shift. And it's also adaptive. It's a normal response to a threat in a trauma. We think about stress as a terrible thing that happens, and for a lot of situations, it's what we need to do when we experience a threat or a trauma. We need to experience stress to manage that. But what's happened in our worlds is we've lost that adaptive quality and it's become chronic. And we experience anxiety and stress in our bodies in a lot of ways. Just again, think for a moment where you experience stress or anxiety. Many of us experience that in our shoulders, in our back. We might have stomach issues. We might have our heart rate increases. I know for me in particular, right about the beginning of 2021, in the middle of COVID, I started having these strange heart palpitations, and I had no idea what they were from. I went to the doctor. They did a ton of tests on me to see if I had a heart condition. And the reality was, it was me experiencing too much stress in my life, and it was affecting my heart. And so, of course, my lovely doctor said to me, Melinda, you just should have less stress in your life. That was easy for him to say, but really difficult to do in the middle of a lot of things that are happening in the world. So if you take a moment and just think, where do you carry your stress? And when you pause and think about that, for many of us, we don't even know. We don't take the time to know where we carry that stress. In fact, many of us go through the whole entire day without feeling our bodies or knowing what's happening inside of us. Some of us skip meals, some of us don't drink water throughout the day, some of us sit in a position all day and we don't even realize that our shoulders are up near our ears. We just don't know that we're experiencing that stress. And so what our challenge is to try to get into our bodies and know what's happening to all of us. We know that there's a thing called the stress response or the trauma stress response. And many of us know about fight or flight. I like this example because it also includes freeze and fawn. So for many of us, we have a kind of a default ingrained response to trauma. And we have learned a lot about childhood trauma, adverse childhood events that have happened to us as kids. And I think as human service providers, we have a tendency to discount our own trauma. I've just finished this great book called The Myth of Normal by Dr. Gabor Mate, and he talks about small t trauma and big T trauma. And for us that are sitting in front of individuals who have experienced an enormous amount of trauma, sometimes the stuff that we have experienced doesn't feel as big. And so then we discount it. And what I want you to think about is all of us have experienced some kind of trauma in our lives, whether it's big T trauma or small t trauma, we've all experienced this. And so for many of us, we've developed these responses. So fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. When you look at this example, you might figure out that you kind of veer towards one response or another. Fighting is certainly, that response is coming out aggressively, dominating, and pursuing power, control. A flight response is more around feeling panicky or anxiety. You are an over worrier or perfectionist, over analytical. This is me. I tend to veer on the flight path. For many of us who have had childhood trauma, a lot of people find that their default mechanism is freeze. So they might feel depressed, dissociate, disconnect from their bodies, find that they're spaced out or find that they're isolating more. And then a fawn response is really that people-pleasing response. When you're really stressed out or you're experiencing a lot of trauma, you do more. You have a hard time setting boundaries, or you have a hard time saying no to things, or you might avoid conflict. So these are different kind of trauma responses. What I want to do now is really talk about this stress cycle in more detail, but I'm going to start with an example. So I want you to think, about being a deer. And so I live out in East Aurora, and there are deer everywhere. In fact, there were deer in my backyard this morning. So when you think about a deer out in the woods, or maybe out in Melinda's backyard eating her hosta plants, say you're just kind of hanging out there with your deer friends, you're all just eating grass, hostas, hanging out, very peaceful, having breakfast. And then all of a sudden, you're a deer and you hear a rustling in the grass next to you. You automatically think, is that a threat? And what happens to deer is they freeze. Lots of times they freeze and their body goes through all sorts of changes. Their eyes dilate, their body freezes, digestion stops, blood might even rush to their trunk or their extremities, getting ready to run. And then their bodies surge with hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. Their breathing changes, everything about their body changes because they're getting ready for responding to a threat. So then say it was a false alarm. There's no threat there. There's nothing there. It was just the wind. So what a deer typically does then is they do something to complete the stress cycle. And so sometimes that might be they shake out their limbs, they make a loud exhale, shake out their head. Frequently, even though the threat's not there, a deer will take off full speed. So what that deer is doing is it's completing the stress cycle. So it's starting at this neutral state. They perceive a threat, and then they go into that kind of fight or flight response, which involves their whole body. And then when the threat is over, they go back to this neutral state. But human beings rarely do that. What we do is we experience a threat or a stressor, and then we stay in that heightened level of stress. We rarely do things to discharge that physical response to stress. And so what ends up happening is we carry this chronic level of stress at all times. We're not even aware that we do it. And so then what happens is stress after stressor after stressor creates these chronic conditions. And that's when we see it really affecting our health. But there's things that we can do to really discharge that stress cycle. And when we're thinking about the stress cycle, we're really thinking about the autonomic nervous system, right? When we're experiencing stress, we really elevate that sympathetic nervous system. We activate the sympathetic nervous system. What we want to do then is go through this stress cycle and then activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that rest or digest part of our nervous system. So what can we do? Well, we're not deer out in the woods, but we can do things to complete the stress cycle and discharge those hormones and that physiological response to stress. And that's by doing things in our bodies. One of the things that we can do is we can move. And that doesn't mean that we have to take off full speed and run away, although we could do that. Moving might mean getting out of your chair and shaking your limbs. So you feel a stress, you have a really difficult experience with somebody, or say you're driving in your car and a car comes and cuts you off and you feel that surge of hormones and stress in your body. You can then move. You can shake your limbs, you can get up, you can dance around the room, you can jump up and down, you can take a walk around the office. Anything that moves your body will actually help your body discharge those stressors. You can also breathe differently specifically, right? So when we're experiencing a stress, we have a tendency to breathe shallowly. Actually, many of us just breathe this way all the time. We don't even know that we're breathing incorrectly, but we only breathe with a little part of our lungs. And so if you're experiencing a stress, if you take a couple moments and then just breathe deeply, taking a couple of deep body diaphragmatic breaths, even if you take a breath at the count of 4 and then exhale to the count of 8. So really doubling the exhale. What that's doing is that's shifting your body and those physiological responses. And it's teaching your body to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And it's also teaching your body that it's safe, that this is a safe place and that your body's in a safe place. Another thing that you can do is just experience a positive social interaction. Many of us do this instinctively, but it really is a matter of having a difficult experience, feeling the stress in your body, and then literally going to your neighbor and talking about something not related to work at all and not related to stress. Talking about the movie you saw on Netflix, talking about the coffee that you had in the morning. Just having a nice, positive social interaction, again, teaches your body that it's safe. You can laugh, you can cry, really hard laughing. That's why comedy is so great for stress. Crying, we know that when we can really let out a really nice cry, it feels cleansing. And that's partly because you're discharging the stress in your body. Right? You can hug somebody. This is really super hard during COVID. It's also hard in a workplace scenario where you don't necessarily want to hug your coworker. But if you have somebody in your life that you can hug, I'm talking about a long 20-second hug, a really awkwardly long 20-second hug. But what you're doing again is you're teaching your body that it's safe, and you're also co-regulating so that you both experience that decreased level of stress in your body. You can also do things creatively, like dancing or painting or knitting. So again, those kind of nice activities that you can incorporate into your life in order to discharge the stress cycle. So these are examples of things you can do. We're going to practice one of those things. So we're going to do a little bit of a grounding meditation. And again, this is a really good time to just give yourself a gift and go through this with me. I'm going to guide you through a nice little grounding meditation. You're welcome to keep your eyes open or closed. What is most important about this whole experience is that you feel comfortable. And so sometimes when I guide people through this, if it's triggering in any way, just remember to open your eyes, look around you, even get up and move a little bit. But this exercise is from Sebene Selassie, one of the phenomenal meditation teachers, and I do this quite often. So I'm going to guide you through this very short meditation. So I challenge you to sit in a chair, if you can, with both feet firmly on the ground. So both feet pressed on the ground. And if you can, sit with a nice straight back, kind of relaxing your shoulders. And if you'd like, you can place your hands on your legs. And then either keep your eyes open or closed. And then just take a moment and bring your awareness to your breath. Just noticing where in your body you feel the breath. Maybe you feel that in your belly. Maybe you feel the rise and fall of your breath in your abdomen. Maybe you feel that in your chest. Or maybe you notice the breath coming in and out of your nostrils. Just take a moment and just notice your breath. And now let's take 3 deep breaths together. So inhale deeply, really filling your lungs full of air. And then exhale completely, really letting out all of that breath. We'll do that again. Inhale deeply. and exhale completely. And then one last time. Inhaling deeply. And this time on an exhale, see if you can just relax your shoulders, relax your jaw, relax your forehead. And then bring yourself just back to your breath. And now bring your awareness down to your feet, noticing the pressure of your feet on the ground, your toes, the balls of your feet, your heels, noticing that pressure of your feet on the earth beneath you. Maybe you feel a little tingling. Noticing the bottom of your feet, and then see if you can just relax your ankles so your feet feel nice and heavy. And now bring up your awareness to your seat on the chair. So noticing the backs of your legs pressing into the chair, feeling that sensation of your legs and your hips on the chair. Again, maybe a little warmth, maybe a little pressure. And then see if you can just relax your hips. We store a lot of tension and stress in our hips. Just relax your hips so that your legs and your feet feel really heavy, just melting into the ground beneath you. And then bring your awareness to your hands. So noticing your fingers, your thumbs, the palms of your hands, feeling that warmth on your legs, maybe a little tingling, pressure, vibration, feeling your hands on your legs. And then relax your wrists, bringing a little weight in your elbows, relax your shoulders. So noticing those 3 touch points, your feet on the floor, your hips on the seat, your hands on your legs. And now let's just take one more deep breath all together, inhaling deeply. And then exhale completely and come back into the room. And just reflect for a moment how you're feeling now. This exercise is so simple and can be really impactful. Because what we're doing for many of us who experience a lot of stress and turmoil and busyness and energy all the time, bringing ourselves down to the ground, focusing on those 3 touch points really helps us focus, again, teaches our body that it's safe, and brings us awareness of our bodies. So that when we're doing things constantly, when we're moving nonstop, when we're so busy, we have a tendency not to pay attention to those things. And so the challenge here and the invitation is to really bring awareness to your breath. Bringing awareness to those 3 touch points will really help you feel grounded. Doing this exercise is what I think essential. And in fact, when I talk about daily meditation practice, this is so important for my own mental health and well-being. What I encourage you to think about is that self-care is really not selfish. For many of us, we say things like, we don't have time to do this. We don't have time to go to the gym. We don't have time to take care of ourselves because we're stretched so incredibly thin. And what I'd like you to think about is really flipping that narrative on its head and saying to yourself, taking care of myself is not only essential, it's required for me to be a decent worker, decent human being. In order for me to do all of these things, I really have to take care of myself first. And so being able to spend some time in things that bring you joy, things that bring you health and healthy well-being are essential to your functioning. But it all starts with compassion. We have a tendency to live in this kind of, go, 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 high productivity culture. We also have a tendency to feel bad about ourselves on a regular basis. And so what I encourage you to, again, to think about is, how do you do self-care practices that start with love and compassion for yourself, for other human beings? Part of that is you try something, and then many of us, we say we're going to go to the gym every day, and then we forget to go to the gym, and then we punish ourselves for not going to the gym, or we try something and it doesn't work, and we fall backwards. That's human nature. We're all going to do that all the time. But if we think about really taking our care of ourselves with some compassion and self-love, it'll go a lot farther. One of the most important things about self-care practices, and again, kind of releasing some stress and trauma in our lives, is really just paying attention to the things that we have control over and letting go of the things we don't have control over. I say that like that's an easy thing to do, but it's a really difficult thing to do for most of us. But it's interesting when you think about things like social media, because I know that many of us have social media that impacts our lives on a daily basis, and we have let it somehow control our lives, especially for our youth. So I want you to think a little bit about your social media. And if you're on Facebook, if you're on Instagram, what are you feeding yourselves? I noticed that when I looked at Facebook or Instagram, I would feel a physiological response to that. And so I decided to really shift my feed for Instagram, and so that I only see positive things. I follow teachers that I love. I follow yoga stuff. I follow meditation guides. When I look at Instagram, I only see positive things. And so I encourage you to think about the things that you're taking in: your news, the newspaper you read, your social media, the people you're surrounding yourselves with, the energy you're bringing into your body, the activities that you're doing. And notice that the things that you have control over, like your responses to things, how people affect you, how you treat others, how you spend your time, those are the things that are in your control. And you need to let go of the things that are out of your control, like the past and the future. We talk a lot about healthy eating for our bodies, but it's not just for your bodies. So what we know is that our minds are plastic, right? So our minds are constantly changing, and we create these neural pathways in our brain all of the time. And so when you start incorporating these self-care practices into your daily activities, what you're doing is you're creating new pathways in your brain. And in order to do that, your brain has to be healthy. And so feeding your body and your brain with whole foods, like the ones that are in these pictures, is not just great for your body, it's really good for your brain. In fact, let's think about when that deer was experiencing a lot of stress, experiencing that threat. Digestion for that deer stopped completely. And so for many of us, when we're in this chronic level of stress, our digestive system is not working right. And so when we feed it fast foods or junk food, or we don't feed it at all, it's really exacerbating the stress in our bodies, and it's really impacting our minds as well. Another thing that's super, super important is sleep. This is where stress for me hits home really difficultly. I have a really hard time with sleep when I'm experiencing a lot of stress. This is my dog, Yoshi. He has no problem sleeping. He sleeps most of the day. But sleep for many of us is impacted. I don't know one person that hasn't had problems sleeping when they've experienced a lot of stress. It's essential to our mental and physical health. And again, it's that way of activating the parasympathetic nervous system, that rest or digest part of our nervous system. But we have a tendency to do things like scroll on our phones or watch TV right before we go to sleep at night. And then we wonder why we can't sleep. But I want you to think about if you have children or when you were a child, you had a bedtime routine, and that was on purpose, right? So think about a childhood bedtime routine. Soften the lights. You might have taken a warm bath, had a warm glass of milk, read a bedtime story, listen to soft music. There's this whole routine that we do with our kids to help them fall asleep. But as adults, we've forgotten that. So think about the things that you can incorporate into your nighttime routine so that you are ready for sleep. And that may be taking a warm bath. That may be shutting down your social media or any blue light for an hour. That's the recommended thing you should do, is turn off your any social media, any blue light for an hour. Maybe you listen to soft music or sleeping meditation, or maybe you try to meditate right before you go to bed. So this kind of consistent bedtime, really good sleep hygiene is important. We think about this lots of times last. But again, when you think about self-care strategies and the importance of sleep, we know that sleep should come first. So let's talk a little bit about meditation. I am headed this summer to my 5th 5-day silent meditation retreat. It's amazing. I love it. It's challenging. Being in silence for 5 days is incredibly challenging, but it's huge. I love it so much. I love to meditate. This definition is great. It's by a meditation teacher called Jon Kabat-Zinn, and mindfulness is a type of meditation, and it really means paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment and doing it non-judgmentally. We did a little bit of that when I guided you through that meditation. We just were paying attention to what was going on in our bodies. We were paying attention to our breath, paying attention to sensations in our bodies. We are doing that on purpose with intention without any kind of judgment. And so Sharon Salzberg, who's a phenomenal meditation teacher, she talks about the importance of meditation and doing it consistently, not because we want to be experts at meditation, but because we want to be experts at living life. So meditation is a practice that we then incorporate into our daily lives. And what it does is it helps us create this space or this pause. So it's this technique called STOP. STOP stands for, the S is for stop, the T is for take a breath, O is observe, observing what's happening in our bodies, and then proceed, P is for proceed. So what this technique is about, especially when you incorporate this kind of regular meditation practice, is doing this on a regular basis. So just taking a moment to stop, taking a breath, just inhaling and exhaling, and then observing what's happening in your body and in your mind. Maybe you just notice, oh, you know what, I'm really hungry. I haven't eaten lunch yet. It's 12:30 and my stomach's growling. Or maybe you notice, I'm really sleepy. I didn't get good night's sleep last night. Or maybe you notice, I'm feeling really light and happy today. Or I'm feeling really tense. Or I just had a fight with my daughter and now I'm upset. And then you proceed, but with this kind of choice. When you create that little space between the stressor and the response, what you're doing now is you're responding to a stressor versus reacting, right? So you're creating that little space in order for you to make better decisions about what you do next. And when you meditate on a regular basis, this becomes part of what you do all the time. You do something, you notice how it feels in your body, you notice what's going on in your head, and then you make decisions after that. you're creating this space between stimulus and response, right? The famous phrase by Viktor Frankl is, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and lies our freedom. That really is talking about paying attention to the things that we have control over. So we have control over our ability to have that pause so that we can make better decisions about how we respond. Meditation, a regular meditation practice, can really help you do that. Here are some examples of meditation apps that I adore. I've used every single one of them. I highly recommend them. In fact, I'm going to leave you, or on the website is going to post a self-care guide that I'm going to give to you all. And there's some lists of podcasts I recommend, apps that I recommend, as well as some books. Insight Timer is a phenomenal meditation app. Most of the content is free, and there's, I don't know, hundreds and thousands of meditations that you can access on that app. The one that I like to use is 10% Happier. And there is a portion of it that's free, and then you pay for a more extensive portion. But I really like this app. There's phenomenal teachers on it. It's founded by a person named Dan Harris, who is a journalist, an Emmy-winning journalist. He used to be an anchorman on Good Morning America, as well as Nightline. And he experienced a panic attack on live TV after covering wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And he found that he was self-medicating with alcohol and cocaine. And then he experienced this panic attack, and he decided to change his entire life based on that experience. So phenomenal apps that I recommend. One of the other things I recommend is regularly moving your body. We have a tendency in our culture to sit. We sit all the time. We sit way too much. So moving your body can mean a matter of, like I said, getting up, shaking your body. It can be taking a walk. It can be taking a run. It could be just walking around your house. But moving your body really shifts that energy in your body and is incredibly healthy.
Melinda, one quick question that
Sure.
came in, just speaking to the apps again. Someone asked, are any of these apps free to human services or free entirely?
Yes, so Insight Timer is free entirely. That has the biggest amount of content. And at times, these other apps will be free for people that are in human services fields, and sometimes for teachers as well. I would recommend, if you were to Google meditation apps, there are a lot of them out there, and a lot of them have great free content. You can also just go on YouTube, and YouTube for free has an amazing amount of meditations. Thanks for that question.
Sure.
So what I've been talking a little bit about is creating these new habits. And Judson Burr, a phenomenal psychologist, talks about doing things for short moments many times. And so remember when we were talking about building these new neural pathways in our brain, what we're talking about is building these kind of resiliency muscles. And so while it's great for Melinda to go on a 5-day silent meditation retreat, it's even better when Melinda meditates every day. Because what I'm doing when I meditate every day is I'm changing those neural pathways in our brain. And what you can do is you can meditate for 1 minute a day. You can walk around the house for 1 minute a day. But if you do it consistently, short moments, many times, that's how we create these new habits, as well as building those neural pathways and resiliency muscles. Another thing that we can do that is super important is to pay attention to the things that we're grateful for. I would like you to think a little bit about the things that you're grateful for in your life. We have a tendency to focus on the negative things, but when we start focusing on the things that we really are grateful for, what we're doing is we're shifting some energy in our body, and we're also creating those new neural pathways. When I first started looking at a gratitude practice, I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for every single morning. What I noticed is that I'm paying more attention to those things that I'm grateful for. And that may be a hug from my daughter. It may be the sun's out. It may be that the flowers are blooming. It may mean that I have a short work week because I'm taking a day off. Those things are very, very simple things, but when we start focusing on the things that we're grateful for, we start shifting our mindset. What I'm going to ask you to do is just to like quickly think about the things that you love to do, and type them in if you can into the chat. What are the things that really bring you joy? The things that you love to do over anything else? For me, that's taking a walk in the woods with my dog, Yoshi. I try to do that every weekend. It's a priority for me and it's important. So I actually can see the chat. So somebody writes that they love to paint, taking photos, sitting next to a waterfall, listening to birds. Being out in nature is wonderful. Teaching dance, beautiful. So yeah, spending time with our kids and hiking, working out. A lot of us like dogs and I like being out in nature. I don't know if you've heard about the phrase forest bathing, but I'm all into that. Just being out in the forest and breathing and experiencing nature is phenomenal. So the thing is, some of us find that we really like to do things like gardening, like being outside in nature. That's really has to become a priority for us because many of us think about the things that we enjoy and then we forget about those things and we don't do them enough. But what we have to do again is those self-care practices is really paying attention to things that you love and doing more of those things so that we're bringing joy into our lives. Thanks for sharing all of your things that bring you joy. This is the most fabulous book in the world. It's called Rest is Resistance. I absolutely love it. Trisha Hersey writes this book. She also has this Instagram page called The Nap Ministry. And what she really talks about is the importance of rest. This is a huge self-care strategy, taking a minute to rest or physically taking a nap. And the way she talks about this as an act of resistance is that we are in this high productivity culture, right? How many times do you ask a person, how are you doing? And that person responds, well, I've been really busy. We all respond busy, like that's the norm. And what Trisha really talks about is how do we take time in our lives to rest, to pay attention to our own existence in the world. And she talks about the fact that we are born to heal, to grow, to be of service to ourselves and our community. And in order to do that, we have to have space to dream, to connect, to create. And our society is not built that way. So one of the most important self-care strategies is resting and taking a nap. Again, my dog is an expert at this. My husband is also an expert at this. He loves his naps. So I encourage you to get that book. Here's some other books that I use all the time. I have mentioned Burnout, the Nikoski twins books. Again, the really wonderful book that I just finished, The Myth of Normal, Gabor Mate. It's a phenomenal book talking about trauma. These are all really good books that I recommend. If you want to take a moment and just take a picture of these books, some of them are listed in that self-care handout as well. I also want you to think about taking a moment and again, just paying attention to your own mental health. Many of us see therapists and counselors, and that's wonderful. I really encourage everybody to do that. I also encourage you to take a moment, go on our website, mhawny.org, and you can go onto our page where you can do a screening. We have screenings for anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, addiction. We have screenings for kids and for parents. Again, this is a really nice gift to give yourself. Going to our website, taking a screening, and then really noticing, how am I feeling, right? You know that I'm a person that struggles with anxiety. I frequently go in and take this screening test as a way to manage and monitor my own anxiety. And so I encourage you to think about it and send it to your friends, to your children. Once you take this test, that, it'll score and it'll make some recommendations. Some of those recommendations might be call somebody right now, you're in crisis. Another recommendation might be connect with a therapist. or call MHA and we can hook you in, hook you up with a therapist or a provider in the area. And the final strategy is really the importance of relationships with other human beings. What we've discovered during COVID especially is this high level of isolation and loneliness that a lot of us have experienced. Adolescents and young people are experiencing this at heightened levels. This feeling of isolation and loneliness has affected our mental health so much because being in relationship with others is key, is really important to our mental well-being. At MHA, we have a campaign called Just Tell One, which really gives you the language and the tools to ask for help. Or if somebody talks to you and needs help, it also will encourage you to look at words and resources that you can use to provide support for people that are asking for help. But I've thought about this in a lot of different ways. For me, especially during COVID, my best friend, Amy, and I connected every single day. She worked in a nursing home as a director of social services, and it was really a difficult place for her to work, really challenging during COVID, as you can imagine. We texted each other every single day, and that she was what I would consider my lifeline, my stable support, my connection to the world lots of times. And honestly, when things were really difficult, we had this secret emoji that we would share, and we could just text that emoji to each other. And that meant, give me a call right now. I really need that extra support. So if you can find that one person, that person could be a coworker, a partner, a family member. It could be your therapist. It could be your priest or minister. It could be just somebody important in your life. It could be somebody that you connect with online. Having that one person that you can really talk deeply about what's going on for you is really, really important, especially with all of us in the human services world. Because we have a tendency to focus on others, we have less of a tendency to really focus on ourselves. And most importantly, how important it is for us to ask for help. We're usually the helpers, and we need to feel okay with asking for help. I'm going to end here with this really important message by my favorite meditation teacher, Sharon Salzberg, and that is that all of us, human nature, we set forth, we struggle, we lose our balance, and then realizing it, we begin again. So I encourage you to take this day, this moment in time, this hour that we've spent together as a way for you to reset, right? You've kind of had this time to pay attention to your own self-care strategies. You're beginning again. And you know what? We're going to struggle, and we're going to lose track of this, and we're going to forget. And then we're going to bring ourselves back to this really important message to really pay attention to ourselves, our well-being, and our self-care. So I want to thank you all for spending some time with me today. We have a couple of minutes if anybody has any questions. I'll open it up to questions. And again, thank you so much for your time.
That was wonderful, Melinda. Thanks. We did have a couple people that sent in questions relating to seeing the book slide or some of the slides again. But the presentation will be posted to our website as well. Amy actually put in the link into the chat, so that will be posted within the next few days.
And this is the slide. This is a slide if you want to take a quick photo too of the books that I recommend as well.
I'll just give people a minute or two here to put in any other questions that they have. I don't see any that have. We do have one. Is this a presentation that can be done for a workplace?
Yes, definitely. If you're interested in bringing it to your workplace, to bring it to your staff or your coworkers, you can reach me. In fact, here's my email. You can reach me and we'd be happy to do that. I'm doing a presentation for a group this evening, so I'd be happy to bring it to your workplaces and we can meditate together.
Wonderful. I don't see any other questions that came in, but lots of thank yous for a wonderful presentation. Melinda, that was great. And thank you, Amy, again for coordinating, and thank everybody on the call for participating in this session today. Amy's posted the link to the evaluation into the chat box. It's just a few brief questions, so we would ask you just to take a moment or two to complete that for us. She's also posted the registration link in the chat box for our special June session, which is June 29th from 9 to 1. Look for more information for our regularly scheduled June session. We're finalizing some of those details now, so more information will be sent out. As always, feel free to look at our website where we have all the past presentations posted, along with the announcements for the future ones. If you're interested in being a presenter or you have ideas for topics you'd like to learn more about, let us know that either in your evaluation or email Amy. And thank you again, Melinda. What a wonderful presentation and something we can definitely all use. We appreciate everything.
Thank you so much.
Right. So everyone have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next month.